There are some big absentees there, not least Gabriel. But I have to say, whenever Mosquera has been pitched in, he's obviously not at Gabriel's level as yet, and this is going to be another massive game for him.
These are the type of games, this is the type of period where it's all about the reason why they sort of built the best squad in the Premier League.
It shows how powerful the squad is they've assembled, and obviously that's a big difference between the two North London teams at this moment in time, because Thomas Frank, when he's got injuries, just doesn't have those type of resources available.
It's actually 15 years since Spurs last won a league game at the Emirates. They've had 7 managers try and fail during that period.
I'm not sure they've got that in their armoury, to be honest, to copycat the Black Cats. I do think that is a blueprint for how you can hassle and harry Arsenal.
Look, I think Spurs will be quite happy to be playing away from home despite it being at the Emirates because of their home form and how much under pressure they feel quite early if things don't go well.
The Spurs don't score that many goals. They've scored 9 in the last 6 matches. They've only won 2 of their last 7. Arsenal have kept clean sheets in 8 of the last 9. I mean, it might be an absolute classic, or it could cause the corner flags to nod off.
I think it's a good time for Spurs to play Arsenal. I don't think it's going to be a pretty game. This could be one of those where it's so tight, one goal wins it.
It's the return of the Premier League with me, Sam Matterface. Alex Crook is on his travels. International windows offer him the opportunity to do a little bit of moonlighting as Judith Chalmers' replacement. And he's been in Portugal for a week. And your fans want to know if you're going to be back for the Premier League weekend.
Well, having just seen the temperature back home sent to me by producer Jeremy, I'm feeling my flight might be delayed by about 2 weeks.
He's going to leave me alone on Friday again, Scott. Keep your phone on.
Sam, honestly, mate, I don't want to talk to that man right now because I was in Portugal the week before, a place where I used to live, Cascais, Estoril, always sun on the beach and around the sea as well. It was teeming down so much we couldn't even go outside, honestly. And then what happens? We receive photos from him. He's on the balcony having a few beers. He's even in the sea as well with the blue sky. Just don't want to see him.
But international breaks are times for resting, Scott. Obviously, by the looks of Crook, it looks like he hasn't done any of that. But you and I obviously have just taken the opportunity just to replenish our souls ahead of what is a big couple of months, isn't it? Because Premier League football is back and it won't be interrupted until March. Turns out, though, international football can steal the nation's conversation, steal its voice, literally, in the case of Ali McCoist. What a fantastic couple of days of international football we have had.
Yeah, I mean, I was over here watching the Scotland game. We were having a family dinner, actually, so it was just on in the background, sound down. We had some music on, but I was engrossed. I mean, what a goal from Scott McTominay to kick it off, and then the 2 goals they scored in stoppage time. What a way to get to your first World Cup since 1998. Obviously, we waxed lyrical about Ireland in the pod we did earlier in the week. Wales did their bit to get into the playoffs. So I think it's great. Listen, there's been a bit of debate, actually, on our various friends' WhatsApp groups. Do we cheer for the home nations? I think as many home nations at major tournaments, the better. Obviously, when it comes to the crunch, we want England to beat them all. But, the Scots are going to add such an atmosphere and sense of occasion in North America, and the Welsh and Irish would do the same.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that? Because I've noticed that as well. And I didn't say anything to you. And I'm fascinated you brought it up because we were in a WhatsApp group the other night and we were all talking about it, saying how brilliant the game was. It was brilliant entertainment. Scotland at one stage were leading by a goal to 0, had 1 attempt on goal, and Denmark had 17. But it was still a very gripping game because especially, and I was saying to the guys that I was with, when this gets to the end, if Scotland are still within a goal, it's going to go crazy because there's so much at stake. And that sort of sense of jeopardy and entertainment, often absent in European qualifiers, actually shows you how it can just capture everyone's imagination. But there is that still. There's some people who really don't like the idea of Scotland going to the European Championships or Wales going to the World Cup or Scotland going to the World Cup. Do you know what I mean? Those big major tournaments have almost always been the preserve of England, Scott. But actually, does it add flavour? Do you quite like the fact that there's a bit more sort of, maybe even a possibility for a clash between the two nations?
Yeah, look, I'll start with a slight negative. I think if you ask the Welsh or the Scots, or maybe even in the Irish, and we should ask producer Jeremy this as well, would they want England to qualify if there's a chance of not? They'd probably say no. We're like, no, we want to bring Scotland on, bring Wales on, bring the Republic and obviously Northern Ireland as well in there as much as possible. So I think I was speaking to producer Jeremy just before. I went to 2016. There was a Republic of Ireland Sweden game, and on one side it was completely green, the other side it was completely yellow. And you know what the Irish like? They're everywhere. I took a picture and put it on our WhatsApp group of an Irish bar in Lisbon. I mean, but they know how to enjoy themselves. So, no, hopefully they'll get there. Hopefully Northern Ireland will get there. Hopefully Wales will get there. And I'm really pleased Scotland will get there. But we should touch on Troy Parrott as well. That was an amazing hat-trick.
Yeah, absolutely superb. And we mentioned that on Monday's podcast when we were reviewing the action, just how well he's done his journey from Tottenham Hotspur, went to Excelsior, scored a lot of goals, was bought by AZ Alkmaar, did okay last season, scored a lot of goals again. Has really scored a lot of goals already this season for them. So he's full of confidence. And his interview afterwards was nothing short of terrific. But we are going to park international football for the best part of 4 months now, right the way till the end of March, and concentrate solely on domestic and European matters on the Premier League All Access podcast, where we give you an insight into what it's like to be at Premier League matches week in, week out. This is the podcast with people that are there every single step of the way, and we will follow you every single step of the way, right the way through till the end of the season, as we bring you updates on the biggest and best league in the world. And guess what? It's back this week with an absolute belter, the North London Derby. 7 of the last 9 games between these two have delivered more than 3 goals. It is a fixture that often delivers in terms of entertainment on the pitch, Scott. However, given the tactics of both managers so far this season, I suspect this might be one not to go down in the pantheon of North London classics.
Yeah, I think it is one of those. I don't think we're being too negative to say Thomas Frank has come in and he's trying to shore up the defence at Spurs. We know how Mikel Arteta tries to sort of win games, make them very, very difficult to break down. Be interesting to see if Spurs, 1, try to, or 2, are even capable of playing in the way Sunderland did and just really trying to put them under that much amount of pressure. I'm not sure they are capable of doing it. I'm not even sure Thomas Frank will try and do it. Although, will he try and press high? Will he try and sit deep? Fascinated to see how that goes. But this could be one of those where it's so tight, 1 goal wins it.
Yeah, I was making notes this morning, having looked back at some of the international results and team news. Arsenal's injury list is extensive and it has grown over the course of the last 10 days. Jesus, we know about. Ødegaard, Havertz has suffered a setback. Gyökeres, obviously, an issue. Gabriel has picked up an injury, which is going to keep him out of the team for at least a month or so. Martinelli on the verge of coming back. Madueke similarly. Timber pulled up for the Netherlands and had to have ice on a calf. Calafiori came out of the Italy camp with a hip injury. So I just wonder whether or not, Crook, you think the dip into the depth of the Arsenal squad, the less sort of frontline stars, will see a more cautious approach from a naturally pragmatic Mikel Arteta.
Well, we're going to see now why they signed so many players in the summer, 2 players for every position, because you're right, there are some big absentees there, not least Gabriel. But I have to say, whenever Mosquera has been pitched in, we saw him, didn't we, come on very early at Anfield and had an excellent game against the champions. So they have a suitable deputy. He's obviously not at Gabriel's level as yet, and this is going to be another massive game for him. But the fact that they can have all those players out, you've got Ben White who can come in and replace Timber or Calafiori if necessary. It shows how powerful the squad is they've assembled. And obviously that's a big difference between the 2 North London teams at this moment in time, because Thomas Frank, when he's got injuries, just doesn't have those type of resources available.
Yeah, he skirted around the issue there, Scott, because he's frightened of upsetting the Arsenal fans again. But do you think that they will be more cautious in their approach to this game, as we have seen in some other of the big games? Or is this an opportunity for him to go, no, actually, I trust the depth in my squad. I really can take this game to a Tottenham team who, let's be honest about it, are pretty fragile?
No, I think he will be perhaps even more pragmatic, to be honest with you. I think even with his best 11 and the great attacking players they do have, he'll still make them difficult to beat first and foremost, and he'll take a 1-0, and why not if he can possibly do it? When you've got these type of players being out, not just up front, but in defence. And look, Timber is a blow, and Timber is a better fullback than Ben White. And I know what people are saying, and Crook being one of them, and he's not wrong in terms of Nkapie has done well, Mosquera has done well. Sounds as if Calafiori might be okay. I'd like to see him shuffle across and maybe Miles Lewis Skelly get a game, but I'm not sure that will happen. The thing is, these are the type of games. This is the type of period where it's all about the reason why they sort of built the best squad in the Premier League. However, when you lose certain key players, whether it's up front, midfield, or at the back, someone doesn't come in just like for like. So what I'm saying here is Gabriel has become such an important and integral member of that side, not just from a defensive point of view, but obviously from a goal scoring point of view, where the set pieces are so important, that unless someone can step up and do exactly the same, there's no doubt about it, that is a bit of a drop, like a Declan Rice going, like maybe a Saka, but you've got a Madueke. I think he's become that important to Arsenal.
Yeah, and I also think it's really important that Crook just immediately went, right, well, they'll bring in Mosquera, and whenever he's played, that will be perfect replacement because he's done very well. But when he's come in before, he's come in for Saliba on the right-hand side of the defence. It actually does change the balance a little bit if he then goes in alongside Saliba. So finding that combination that works with Saliba might be important for Mikel Arteta, and it may well be that Nketiah is that player that comes in alongside him because he's more naturally left-sided. But all over the park, there are going to be differences for Arsenal. If you look at Spurs and their issue with Arsenal games over the course of the last 15 years, it's actually 15 years since Spurs last won a league game at the Emirates, Crook. I mean, 15 years ago, Max Dowman was still in nappies. They've had 7 managers try and fail during that period. 15 years ago, you and I were still working together. Some things never change. What chance do you give Tottenham this time around? Because I wonder whether or not the blueprint for the City game, where they pressed really high and tried to harass from the top end of the pitch right from the very beginning, is the blueprint here.
I sort of agree with Scott. It's not the Thomas Frank way, certainly not with this Tottenham squad. I'm not sure they've got that in their armoury, to be honest, to copycat the Black Cats. I do think that is a blueprint for how you can hassle and harry Arsenal. Particularly on your own turf. I think it's different going away from home, and that record, as you mentioned, at the Emirates is very poor. I don't think I've seen enough from Tottenham, even though they've got a good away record, to suggest they can go there and buck that trend. I think Mikel Arteta will find a way to win, even as you've suggested, if it's not the goal fest that we usually get when these two meet.
Yeah, Mickey van der Ven has been Spurs' top goal scorer this season. Will he be looking to give Arsenal a taste of their own medicine here by maybe scoring from a corner or coming up with an inventive set piece, Scott?
Well, we know Thomas Frank's very good at set pieces. Brentford were, and obviously have carried on down under Keith, but certainly Thomas, when he first came up into the Premier League, was all over the set pieces. So yes, I wouldn't be surprised. That's absolutely the aim. This game might be decided. I think Spurs would be quite happy to be playing away from home, despite it being at the Emirates. Look at their home form and how much under pressure they feel quite early if things don't go well. So that pressure won't be there, but there's no doubt about it. The pressure will be there. It's a North London derby. I think it's a good time for Spurs to play Arsenal. I say this all the time. I'm not saying Spurs are a small club in any way, but the team that's perhaps a little bit lower down the table, if they can meet one of the top teams straight after an international break, when they're still, got a few little injuries and sleeping patterns all over the place, I think they could well try and press as much as possible. But then I just see Arsenal going long. And I think they're quite happy to do that as well and then play the percentages. I don't think it's going to be a pretty game. I'd like to see, if it looks like Kudus is going to be back, I'd like to see Brennan Johnson on the left-hand side. I thought he did well for Wales in midweek, a goal and assist, and just cutting inside. So it's going to be interesting to see, the team selection and tactics. But I don't see it being a pretty game.
I just think they've got more magic, Arsenal, as a Saka. I just think there's too much in that team that would be able to unlock what is, let's be honest, quite a leaky Spurs defence. And Spurs don't score that many goals. They've scored 9 in the last 6 matches. They've only won 2 of their last 7. Arsenal have kept clean sheets in 8 of the last 9. It might be an absolute classic, or it could cause the corner flags to nod off. Spurs manager Thomas Frank did give an interesting interview during the international break, Crook, in which he talked about being offered the chance to interview for the Chelsea and Manchester United jobs on the same day during the summer. Was this another example of a Tottenham manager making a PR misstep, or was it Thomas Frank just reminding everybody that he was quite highly sought after during the summer?
Yeah, I think probably the latter. Thomas Frank is a very intelligent, very articulate man, so he doesn't say anything by mistake. I think he probably feels a little bit unloved by the Spurs fans, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because I mentioned their record away from home, which is really good. But if you're not winning games at home, then that gives you a problem, because obviously that's where the bulk of your supporters get to watch you. That's where you really need to generate a sort of siege mentality, and they haven't done that so far. I think he's done okay, Thomas Frank. I don't understand the negativity when you look where they were last season. At one stage, a couple of weeks ago, they had the chance to go second in the Premier League. Yes, they're not scoring with much regularity, but they haven't really got a striker, have they? Dominic Solanke showing no signs of getting fit anytime soon. He shored them up defensively. They're doing okay in the Champions League. So I'm not sure what Tottenham fans expect, to be honest.
Okay, that game live with us. We're going to be there, aren't we, Crookie? Are you going to be back for that one? Hopefully you are.
We'll be there, but there's no room at the inn for Perry Groves, former Arsenal.
No room at the
former Arsenal title winner, can't get into the game.
I did offer to give up my seat, by the way. I know you didn't do that, but I offered to give up my seat for Perry Groves. But I was told in no uncertain terms that I had to be there. But okay, yeah, we haven't got Perry in the stadium, but he will be on the show from 1:30 on Sunday afternoon. Game day live coming from the Emirates as Arsenal take on Tottenham. Liverpool against Nottingham Forest, 3:00 on Saturday. 2 steps forward and 1 big push back for Liverpool. A disaster of a result for Arne Slot before the international break, losing to Manchester City, leaving Crook and others to suggest that their title hopes were all but done, although I think the others that suggested it didn't use AI to come up with a stat to back them up. How happy, Scott, will Arne Slot have been to have had a bit more time off, just to gather his thoughts, really?
Yeah, I think even though for a lot of his players it's not a break, they're playing internationals, they're travelling. Obviously, we know what Dominic Szoboszlai happened to him in that game against Ireland. But I just think that the mental side of it, when things aren't going well, it's nice to just completely switch off. And I don't know if Arne Slot went to Ibiza. I don't know how the weather was over there. I don't know. He didn't mind a journey there in the summer. But yeah, I think, again, the interesting thing is who's fit, who's available. You know, that's what you've got to do after the break. And if you remember, was it the Forest game in the sort of September, October of last year, where he kind of played the players he just thought would be the best 11 and ended up losing that one. So look, it's a very different Forest side, or certainly different feel and different manager. But he would have been absolutely delighted just to get away himself as well as his players too, even if they didn't actually have time off.
Well, Alexander Isak hasn't played for Liverpool since the 22nd of October. He did manage 28 minutes for Sweden in defeat to Switzerland, quite a hefty defeat to Switzerland in the first game of the international break. And then he sat on the bench for the second one and didn't get off it. So I just wonder how fit he is, and is he going to be able to, I don't know, get up to speed at any time soon, because it's been quite some while now. I think what's really baffling most people is not the fact that he was unfit in the first place, because we know the reasons for that, but the sort of amount of time that it's taken to get him up to speed seems almost ludicrous, really.
Yeah, and we spoke about this, didn't we, during the game at the Etihad, that the fact they were chasing it in the second half and still left their most expensive player, the most expensive player in English football history, on the bench. How has he allowed himself to get into a situation where his fitness levels have dropped so much? We know he was training away from Newcastle, but presumably he had a personalised fitness plan. It's not like the old days where players went on holiday and came back massively overweight. So I think Liverpool will be frustrated.
How many kilos?
4 pounds.
Yeah, that's better, yeah.
You know what, Sam? I've actually heard Crookie cane Alexander Isak about his fitness, and it does make me laugh. No, you're right.
He needs to follow the Crookie diet. He'd be all right then. But it's baffling, Scott, isn't it? I mean, you've been there. You've been a player. You come back after pre-season. How's he allowed himself to get into this situation? How have Liverpool allowed him to get into this situation?
He might have been unlucky, mightn't he, Scott? He might have just picked up an injury at just the wrong time, and that sets you back even further, doesn't it?
Right, so that was my question. Have you heard of any sort of niggle that he has picked up?
He's had a groin problem, yes, which is a persistent one, which has been going on for a long time, actually.
Yeah, so again, I mean, obviously Rodri's a much more, much worse injury, and it just takes time when you're out of action for whatever reason, especially if you miss pre-season and don't get that sort of the miles under the belt in the way that you need to before the body really stresses at the start of the season. You can pick up little injuries here, there, and everywhere, and if you do, it's difficult to play 100% of the time. But look, Liverpool fans as well as just football fans can turn around and say, guys, we've given you a little bit of time now, and we're in the doo-doo right now. We need you, the money that's been spent and the effort you made to get to Liverpool, to step up and be one of our top players. And, Ekatika, I think, has blown him out the water so far.
What about Nottingham Forest? Unbeaten in 3. They've shown they can score recently as well. I think they've got a few goals during that period. They can trouble that Liverpool defence, can't they? Well, in fact, anyone can trouble that Liverpool defence at the moment, Crook.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that we knew Sean Dyche would do pretty quickly is get Forest more organised. I think he's managed that. Certainly, they're not shipping as many chances as they were earlier in the season. Obviously, Chris Wood has had a bit of a knee issue, so we don't know yet if he'll be fit to lead the line, because that'll be a really interesting battle between him and out of sorts Van Dijk and Konate for the majority of the season so far. And obviously they have a history of going to Anfield and coming up with a game plan to pick up all 3 points. So, I don't think this is an absolute home banker. I would expect Liverpool to win, but I tell you what, if Forest get the first goal, it's going to get nervy.
You haven't gone for any last man standing, though, have you?
No, I haven't. A lot of people have, but having seen Liverpool at the Etihad, yes, Manchester City were very good, but they were very poor, Liverpool. So I think you'd be a brave man to pick them up this week.
Do you know, it's interesting, isn't it, just how poor they have been. It's felt strange because we've obviously been fortunate enough, Crook and I, to do so many games this season, but go to a lot of the big games on this Sunday afternoon show. And we've seen Liverpool perform a lot. And, they do not look like a team that are going to challenge for the title. They don't look like they've got the confidence. They don't look, the swagger is completely gone. The sense of vulnerability there is quite frightening, really, for a team that was so effective last season. Talking about teams whose fortunes have divergently changed from last season, Newcastle and Manchester City, 5:30 on Saturday night. Beware the wounded animal. Eddie Howe said just before the international break, Scott, that it was the first time in 4 years that his team had faced serious questions. I think it'll be a different team that come out on Saturday night, but City have to maintain their momentum. So this should be an absolute cracker of a game, and it usually is when these two come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was at the G-Tech for the game just before the break, and Newcastle were really poor. I mean, really poor. I mean, Brentford were poor in the first half. And they even got the first goal. And a Brentford fan sort of texted me and said, we're struggling. I just said, look, this is the Newcastle side where on paper and the individual players they've got and the midfield they've got, which you've always lauded about, are just not playing well. If you can somehow find a way and step it up. And they did. And Newcastle had nothing. And it was back-to-back defeats there. And obviously what happened with the West Ham game, that was really poor. I do think them being at home is a big difference. It shouldn't be such the difference. I think this will be a tough game for City again, coming off the back of the international break. But City do look good at the moment, don't they? Maybe they're not quite to how they were sort of 2-3 seasons ago, but that you get the feeling that they're just getting closer and closer. So if this was at home for City, it'd be an absolute home banker for me. With it being at St James's Park, does make it interesting.
I think it depends, their title challenge, whether or not they can keep Haaland fit, because he got 2 more goals over the international break. Norway secured their World Cup place. Congratulations to them. It's the first time that they and Scotland have got there since 1998. We're doing lots of 90s throwback this season, aren't we? Doku got a couple for Belgium too. Manchester City have to keep both of those fit, I think, in order for them to stay in the title race. But Haaland in particular, he's so integral to the way they play. He scores over 35% of their goals, and that is a major chunk. You've got to make sure that he doesn't pick up any injuries. And this key period over December and January where a lot of games are being played, I think you've just got to manage his minutes correctly. Newcastle is a bit of a story though, isn't it? Because they finished 5th last season, 2 points off the relegation zone now as it stands, Crook. What are the struggles down to?
Well, obviously injury. They've been without some key players, not least Johan Wissa, obviously yet to kick a ball for them yet. I think Livramento has been a massive loss as well. We were at the game against Arsenal when he suffered another knee issue, and certainly they've missed his zest and his ability to run at defences as well as obviously defend himself. But I think the Isak saga casts a cloud that maybe is still hanging. And I do go back to the summer and wonder if the owners could have intervened in that situation earlier, could have got a deal done with Liverpool much earlier, which might have been better for all concerned. But also, obviously, they're trying to balance playing Champions League football with what they want to achieve domestically. And if you look back to when they were last in the Champions League, they tended to struggle in the Premier League after playing in Europe. So the squad's just not big enough, is it? I think that's pretty clear for all to see. I think they need reinforcements in January. I'm not sure they're going to bring them in by the bucket load. And certainly in terms of Champions League qualification, I think they look a long way short.
I've heard a lot about there being a problem with Newcastle, and I think Eddie Howe saying it as well just before the international break, saying that his team are under serious scrutiny, sort of highlighted that. But I think there's a couple of things at play here. One, this is how good Newcastle have been under Eddie Howe, that they lose a couple of games and everybody starts to pull their hair out. Secondly, could this be a little bit of an overreaction here, folks? Have you actually looked at the results themselves? Have you actually looked at the fixtures themselves? Because I went through it this morning. Newcastle have won 6 of their last 9 in all competitions. At St James's Park, they've won 7 of the last 10 home games. Won 7 of the last 10 home games. And the only teams that have stopped them from winning at home this season are Arsenal, Liverpool, and Barcelona. They should have beaten Liverpool, they should have beaten Arsenal, and they were well in the game against Barcelona. So do you think there's a little bit of an overreaction here, Scott?
Yeah, I do. And as Crookie said, to sort of balance the Champions League and Premier League, and it's not always the game after the Champions League game, it's just the whole season of balancing everything. We talked about how the home form has been good. Look, Isak was an issue in the beginning, even though I thought the performances were pretty decent. Visser being out, that was the one who was meant to stretch the defences when Voltemado always wants to come short all the time. But Voltemado himself has done really well. I think Anthony Gordon, if you look at his stats, they've not been, and as a player I really, really like, he's not sort of affecting games in the way that we know he can. I also think the new signings haven't really done particularly well, apart from, as I say, Voltemada. You know, you talk about Ramsey, and there's a few others there as well, where Elanga's really struggled and he's not being brought on or started. But the bottom line is, I'd pin it down, if you had to pin it down to one thing, and it's more than one, is the away form. And the away form, and I think that the West Ham game and the Brentford game, for a team that wants to regularly be in the Champions League, with respect to both of those sides, you've got to be winning the games or at least look competitive. And they haven't looked competitive. So that's his biggest worry for me.
Yeah, no Dan Burn, he's suspended. Gordon should be back despite missing international duty. Pope was concussed before the international break, so it'll be interesting to see if he's recovered. Joel Linton had a bit of an issue, didn't go well on international duty. Livramento supposed to be close as well. We think Visser should be back by the first week in December for Newcastle United. For Manchester City, Rodri still touch and go whether or not he's going to make it because now a thigh injury. The good news is they've got Nico Gonzalez there, who really has stepped up and played well. And we've mentioned him a few times now on this particular podcast. We think he's done very well indeed. Okay, that's the title race. Let's look at the bottom. Hold on a second. Sorry. Producer Jeremy here says that's the title race. Sorry. If Chelsea beat Burnley on Saturday, they go second in the table. How on earth is that the title? How is that, Scott? Back me up here. How is that the title race?
Do you know what? You're right from a mathematical point of view, but we were here last season, weren't we? You know, with the same situation.
Scott, I can't believe it. I mean, listen, I don't believe they can win the title, but they should. But we should be talking about them at least. They are, you know. Have a word
with producer Jeremy about that.
He's just he's still hungover from Sunday night, I reckon. He's 10 Troy Parrott pints down, isn't he?
My argument is there's not enough senior players, and I've had Joe Cole and John Terry I spoke to recently.
We just drop those names from the sky, shall we, Scott?
Well, it's just friends. That's all I'm saying. There's no name drop. I don't name drop my friends. They're my friends, you know. But JT said exactly the same thing. You know, there's not enough senior players there. And until they get a couple more in, we'll have to be patient and wait for them to organically get there.
Okay, so let's talk about them in the different section, which is geared towards Burnley, I think. The title race is done, apparently. So let's get to the bottom of the table, where Rob Edwards is back. He's got a mission impossible on his hands at Wolves. Yes, Wolverhampton Wanderers against Crystal Palace. First game in charge for Rob Edwards. He's back in the Premier League. Wolves on 2 points so far. What's more likely, Crook? He keeps them up or he breaks Derby's record of 11 points in the Premier League season?
No, they'll get more than 11 points. I know that Rob is confident that this team is better than the Luton team that obviously he couldn't keep in the Premier League. He's not stupid. He knows the enormity of the task on his hands. As you said, mission impossible. Probably would be the greatest of relegation creator escapes if he can pull it off. But I do think you will see an upturn in results. There's going to be a feel-good factor, I think, at Molineux this weekend because one of their owners come back and obviously he's got a little stick for it. So I think the Wolves fans are going to really get behind him. Do I think he can keep them in the league? No, but I think he will make them more competitive than they have been so far. They were quite competitive, actually, in the first half against Chelsea before the old defensive issues came back to bite them in the second 45.
Can you get fresh ideas across that quickly in an international break where you've had 11 players go on international duty?
No. But what you can do is, again, we talked earlier about the mindset of what an international break can do, whether you're still playing or not. The manager's gone, a new one's coming in. With that brings optimism, as Crookie rightly says. And I don't think fans quite realise just how powerful they are. People you can turn around and say, well, you earn this amount of money, whatever's being shouted at you, you should be able to deal with it. But let me tell you, it's a lot easier to play when the fans are behind you than when your home fans are on top of you, almost from the word go. So I think that's going to change now. I think this game is absolutely crucial, and it's not an easy one at all. In fact, I think two of the next three games are at home to Palace and Forest. But you've also got in there, you've got Aston Villa away, you've got Arsenal away, you've got Liverpool away, and you've got United both home and away. And that's up until the end of the new year. I'm telling you now, if that doesn't go well in those first few games, maybe that sort of facetious question that you asked may be quite relevant as to whether you don't have to look like that. It was a funny question, but I do worry for them. And I worry for Rob. I get it. It's his club and he's closer to home and, he's getting paid more money. But I don't know, Crookie, what are the terms of the possible sacking in there? Because I don't see them staying up. And if they go even further behind, then I worry for him. If not this season, then at the start of next season if they don't start.
Well, and he's been there, hasn't he, when a sort of relegation hangover continues, as it did when he was Luton manager. I'm told there isn't a break clause in the contract, so it's not like if he fails to keep them up, then they can amicably part company in the summer. It's a 3.5-year deal because I think Wolves are aware that they're probably going to find themselves in the Championship, and this is an appointment with one eye on coming back at the earliest opportunity. But they are a club who have a history of dishing out long contracts and then firing managers. They did it with Gary O'Neill, and obviously they've just done it with Rob Edwards' predecessor as well. So he will need results.
But you mentioned that Vitor Pereira did have a clause in his contract where he didn't end up getting paid up anywhere like the long contract would suggest that he did. So I suppose the question is it a similar situation for Rob Edwards? He might not necessarily have a break clause in it, but is there some sort of performance-related clause that if he doesn't manage to achieve a certain number of points or if he doesn't start next season particularly well, they can give him just a year's money and he's off as well? Because, but everybody thinks nowadays that what happens is if you get sacked as a manager, you get paid up all your money. That doesn't happen. And we've articulated this on the podcast before. Almost in a sense, the contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on because it's just a notice period. There is a fixed amount of money, I think, in most contracts. Unless you're Mourinho or unless you're, Thomas Tuchel, there isn't necessarily the option for you to get paid up in full, Crook, is there?
Well, Graham Potter didn't do too badly out of being fired by Chelsea, but I take your point.
But he was at Chelsea, and that was different. Yeah. He was given a very good deal by Chelsea, and I don't think Chelsea paid him up in full, did they? They paid him up until the point that he got another job, which ended up being quite a long time.
Yeah, and that was a similar situation with Rob when he left Luton. Obviously, took the Middlesbrough job, although what a lot of people don't realise, he actually walked away from quite a lot of money to take that job at Borough, which is why some of the coverage of his departure, I think, has been a little bit unfair. Obviously, he would have been in a strong bargaining position when it came to Wolves because he was in a job, because it was such a risk. So I would be surprised if his compensation is not a lot higher than it would have been for Vitor Pereira.
Sam, he was in such a great position at a club that's doing so well, going into a club that from a professional point of view doesn't really make too much sense. So it's more of a personal point of view. He was in A1 position. He couldn't have been in a better position. So if he or his agent hasn't negotiated an incredible divorce settlement before he signed the marriage, then something's wrong. The only thing I'd say to Crookie was what Rob said is from a football point of view about this is a better squad than what he had at Luton. I think it's more talented, but I'm not quite sure it's sort of Premier League proven or not proven. That's not the right word because Luton weren't there, but that sort of the mental toughness and the hardness of never giving up and resilience. And I don't think Wolves have that.
Absolutely, and the robustness of the team as well. You know, the idea that Championship football actually prepares you quite well for Premier League football, as we've seen with players that have made the transition from one to the other. But there's a lot of young players that have come into this Wolverhampton Wanderers squad that have no experience of Premier League football and are expected to just go and perform. And it's not always as easy as that. Look, listen, I think it's pretty sad that we spent most of our time talking about Wolves and Crystal Palace and about the possible repercussions of Rob Edwards getting sacked when he hasn't even played a first game yet. I hope he does really well. I hope he gets them on track and I hope he makes them competitive because I think actually, Wolves in the Premier League is quite a good thing, because they always add a little bit of colour. There's good fan base there. The atmosphere is brilliant. But the last thing that he will want to do is take that club down into the Championship because it's a very steep climb back, that is for sure. They play a Crystal Palace team that have played very well under Oliver Glasner, and after their little blip, they've got themselves back on track, scoring goals and looking lively. They should have beaten Brighton before the international break. They were on top, especially in the first half of that game, and didn't manage to get over the line. But they will feel as if they've got a great opportunity to get 3 points at the weekend. So should Chelsea, who go away to Burnley, live on talkSPORT. 12:30 this one. We'll be there bringing you the full commentary. Maresca welcoming back a lot of players from international duty here. And Burnley's 5 Premier League games at home this season don't see too many goals. So will they this time around, Crookie?
Well, they've been competitive at home, haven't they? In particular, I go back to that Liverpool game when they needed a stoppage time penalty from Mo Salah to see them off. They obviously had a very strong defensive record in the Championship, and I think certainly at Turf Moor they've continued that. I saw Burnley at West Ham. West Ham won 3-2 in the end, and Scott Parker was so down. You were there as well, Scott, after the game, because they did not deserve to lose. They took the lead. They were comfortable. They had West Ham on the ropes, and they just made some basic errors. I think he's got a bit of criticism from the Burnley fans for the in-game changes that he made. They are certainly a lot better and a lot more competitive and a lot harder to beat than they were under Vincent Kompany. So in answer to your question, I don't think Chelsea will necessarily have this all their own way.
A victory for Chelsea, as I've already mentioned, will see them up to second, and they are unbeaten in 5 games away from home. The prospect of Cole Palmer almost being back would probably have most Chelsea fans licking their lips, Scott. It might be a little bit too early for him this time around, but do you think they'll have enough firepower anyway? They do, after all, have Esther Wow, who scored twice on international duty for Brazil in the last week.
Yeah, and good finishes. And again, it's one of those that sound like a broken record. You almost need to see who's there, go through the red zone, see who's in there, see who can play. But Chelsea do have the squad. They've shown that. Even without Cole Palmer, their results have been very, very positive. And I thought even with that Wolves game, where they found it hard to break down a very resilient Wolves in that first half, I still thought they were playing well. I thought the wide players were excellent. I thought Enzo was brilliant. I like the way Chelsea are playing right now. I like the way that they seem to be evolving. Again, broken record. I want to see a couple of senior players in there, goalkeeper, centre half, but they're growing together. They're very talented. A lot of money's been spent, and so they should. But they're not panicking now when they can't break teams down. And listen, this is going to be a very, very difficult game. Burnley, a very different proposition when they play at home. They're very difficult to break down. But I genuinely feel that Chelsea can nick this one. Again, it might be one of those where it's just the one goal, but they will be patient. They will have possession, and their star players, someone will step up and create something.
Is there a chance, though, Crook? Because we know what Chelsea are like. They get up for the massive games, that they have one eye on Barcelona.
Maybe, and Enzo Maresca is going to have to be careful with his team selection from that perspective. But do you know one of the most impressive Chelsea performances I've seen this season actually was away at Forest when obviously Ange was on his last legs, but it wasn't their biggest game of the season. But they went there, they did a very professional job and ended up running out easy winners. So if they can produce that level of performance, then I agree with Scott. I think they've got enough to win the game.
They were absolute guff in the first half of that game. They were dreadful and should have been behind. And it was because of the changes that he made actually at half time, where he just decided to throw on 3 players and completely alter the shape of the team, that they went out and blitzed Nottingham Forest in the second half. I thought they were a little bit lucky to get to half time at 0-0 in that match, to be honest with you. But afterwards, you're absolutely right. They then made very, very light work of Nottingham Forest. And sometimes with Chelsea, you have that sort of game of two halves, don't you, Scott? Because they have got these players that sometimes should perform and then don't, and then you switch it around and then they do.
It's the inconsistency of youth, you know, and again, that's why you need those senior players around you in the game and look, you're right. And I felt sorry for Ange after that particular game because it was really poor finishing from Forest.
It was, yeah. And they hit the crossbar and the post twice in one move, didn't they?
They should have scored 3 goals themselves. And in the end, but that's what top teams do. Even if they're not playing well, they find a way. He made changes. He was very proactive at half time. And if things aren't going well at Burnley, and it will take a little bit of time to get the lactic acid out of them after the international break, he's got people off the bench, game changers, finishers.
And I think that's really key, isn't it? You know, you can either look at Enzo Maresca sometimes as someone who picks the wrong team, which some of us do, and then is able to change it and come up with the solutions, or he is the man that reacts and gets things sorted by making positive changes. It's 6-7, 6-7. You don't know. You could.
Don't you start with that nonsense.
I'm not doing that, or my daughter will give me stick.
Oh my God, seriously! Like we've had, I've been with my boy all week this week, and everything is. It's everything all the time. Every time you roll a dice, 6-7. Oh, for God's sakes. Anyway, why we should always just concentrate on the football and not do any family activities, because we come back with stupid parlance when we do. Looked at one stage as if Marco Silva was going to leave Fulham this window, but now he's been offered a new contract. What's the latest, Crookmeister? Have you been had your ear to the ground in these conversations?
I did get a message yesterday saying that Fulham are hopeful that he'll sign a new deal. I'm not convinced he's in any great rush to do so. I think he might leave them waiting a little bit longer. Obviously, there's a January transfer window on the horizon. We know that he wasn't happy with their summer recruitment, so part of me thinks this could be a bit of a power play to get more money to strengthen in that window. And they need to, don't they? Because we talked about it going into the international break, that Fulham actually are one of those sides who are looking anxiously over their shoulders, particularly because they struggle to put points on the board away from home. They lack a goal threat for me. I'm not sure that Rodrigo Muniz is necessarily the answer. Raul Jimenez struggles to stay fit. Emil Smith-Rowe, I think, has had some fitness issues as well. So he needs a bit of help. But yeah, Fulham seem confident that they will convince him to sign a new deal.
Okay, Burnley-Chelsea, 12:30, Premier League live action from talkSPORT on Saturday. We've got Coventry-West Brom at the same time. That's on talkSPORT 2. Game Day Live with Adrian Durham, Troy Deeney, Alan Pardew. They go round the grounds from 2:30. 3 o'clock, we've got Leicester-Stoke on talkSPORT 2. And on Sunday, the Steel City Derby, Sheffield Wednesday against Sheffield United, is live on talkSPORT from midday. And then Crookie and I will be at the Emirates Stadium for Game Day Live on Sunday from 1:30. We'll have Dean Ashton, Perry Groves alongside us. We've got Leeds, Aston Villa, Arsenal against Tottenham, the Women's FA Cup and the EFL to talk about as well. Make sure you are with us for that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I will see you again Monday morning when we review all the Premier League action. Crookmeister, I'll see you on Friday. Scotty, see you over the weekend. That was it for Premier League All Access. Make sure you tell all your friends about us and listen to talkSPORT this week, because we've got some cracking action as always. Have a good one.